Okay, let's get into it. There's a really human tendency that shows up kind of everywhere in life, not just in our faith, where we confuse familiarity with transformation. We assume that because something is known, it is therefore lived. But because something is understood doesn't necessarily mean that it's also embodied in our lives. Because knowing and doing are just not the same thing. And James wants to press into that gap here in James 1, verse 22. But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. So remember, James is writing people whose faith has cost them. They're not casual listeners. It's a community shaped by the word. They hear it read, they discuss it, they know its language, they've given themselves to it, um, which is exactly why James here is issuing this warning. The danger is not the rejection of the word; it's like a passive agreement with it. James says, deceiving yourselves. That's the striking part. It is he doesn't say mistaken. He doesn't say confused. He's not talking about misunderstanding. He's saying being deceived, meaning the person genuinely believes that their lives that they are aligned with God's truth while remaining completely unchanged by it. So it's not hypocrisy. It's a self-misreading. We've seen this pattern before. Israel in the Old Testament repeatedly hears God's commandments, and they affirm them. Yes, we hear that. We receive it. Yes, that's good. We're on board. And they even will celebrate them, but then their lives drift. They sort of drift in practice. And Jesus wants to confront that same tension, and he says, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I tell you to do? The very implication of calling someone Lord is meaning, hey, that they are king, they are in charge, and we will do what they say. And so there's this ironic twist when we say Lord, Lord, but we don't actually do the things that Jesus tells us to do. So the promise isn't hearing. The illusion is that hearing equals obedience, right? And if you have kids, you understand what this means. That just because they hear what you're saying doesn't mean that it's going to play itself out in their lives. God's word isn't merely informational. It's inherently supposed to be directional. The word it calls, it reshapes and forms, it presses into a lived reality, or at least it's supposed to in our lives. And to hear the word without any movement causes what's called a subtle spiritual distortion, where it's the sense of growth without the substance of growth. That's why going to a Bible study for the sake of simply gaining knowledge can be dangerous, because we can assume that that means that we're growing in our faith. But if it only stays information in our head and doesn't become lived out practice, then we're actually, as James would say, potentially deceiving ourselves. So where might this show up in your life? Where are you comfortable with truth, but um, maybe you're resistant to the implications? It might not be a dramatic defiance. I am in willful sin. It could just be like a quiet postponement of like, yeah, that's probably not all that important. What would it look like today to respond to the word in one sort of specific, small, concrete way? To add some movement to the knowledge. Transformation in our lives, rarely really lasting transformation, rarely starts with these grand gestures. It begins with lived response, about simply taking small, practical steps of obedience and trusting God in the midst of them. And so let that sit with you, wherever you find yourself. And God goes with you today.